Welcome back to Race Control on day 10 of leg 5 of the Volvo Ocean Race. I have with me two special guests today, Sidney Gavignet, 4-time Volvo sailor and race winner, and Campbell Field, expert navigator and offshore racer. Let's get right into the racing now, you guys. They're in the heart of the Southern Ocean, yet it is light and we have 4 boats within sight of each other, 5 boats within 5 miles of each other. So kind of not at all what we were expecting. Campbell, what's your take?
It looks very interesting. Excuse me, I've been following the race reasonably closely when time allows, and lucky enough to get the position reports from the race office, and it looks pretty intense. It's a very different game, I think, from one that probably Sidney might remember, and looking at the reports, even Ian Walker stating yesterday that they just didn't expect to be surrounded and so closely tight-knit in the middle of the Southern Ocean. I guess it's a function of the boats that they're racing these days, and they're so evenly matched that they struggle to get away from each other. There's some. It's quite interesting looking at it from a navigational perspective, because you see some opportunities for people to split, but there's been a statement in the past from some that the boats are tied together by AIS, and it looks pretty intense, probably a lot more intense than races of past. Sydney will probably have a different view, but looks very intense, being 5 miles apart in the middle of the Southern Ocean, where every metre counts.
It's crazy. I mean, it is actually, it's not, at least we were thinking, it's not something we were at all expecting. Let's talk for a second about that AIS and being tied together. Sidney, we've heard from Ian before that at times when he wants to maneuver and he's within AIS range, he actually has said, I wish we would just stop so we could get out of range and then jibe. And this morning it came up in our weather meeting that essentially if the leaders had stopped yesterday, they would have gotten the front first and Dongfang wouldn't have had this sort of miracle move. But it's not really in the DNA of a sailor to stop in any way. What's your take on that? And also a little bit about the Chinese. Were they just lucky getting it from behind and being able to go catapulting into first yesterday?
I just want to come back on what Campbell said. For me, looking from outside, I'm convinced that this race is the hardest ever. It's as hard as usual because of the conditions. You're still in the Southern Ocean, and 4 years later or 4 years sooner, it's more or less the same conditions. But the fact that you're so close to each other is giving extra pressure, and this pressure is making you tired, of course. So it's more load on the people's shoulders, also because they are short-handed. I'm really convinced that this race is the hardest. The big picture format as well, the fact that people spend more time on the water, the race is 9 months. People are spending more time on the water than it was in the past, makes the race, I think, incredibly hard for the guys. So I'm very, very, very impressed by what they do, and I think rotation is something that's very important. The AIS is not in the DNA. Well, the DNA has to change because the time is changing, and we're still sailing monohull, but we have to follow the time. Now we are in a time where boats start to fly. So I think it's soon enough to get used to the AIS. AIS is a small thing. But it's it's one design. It's close contact. I think it's fantastic. It's nice to watch. Very, very impressive.
There have been 2 options here in this leg. There's been a northern option of much more breeze, and then there's been the southern option, which they've all basically taken, which is shorter, but at times has said a lot less breeze, and that's what we've seen. Is this the way of playing the safe move, and is it the right move?
I had a bit of a hard look at it last night. The sort of from where the boats were at the 1800 sked yesterday evening, and there was definitely a northerly option to sort of head northeast and try and hook into the back of the low pressure system between the fleet and South America. But there was also the southerly option of getting south and bouncing off of the limits of the ice gate for the next 2 days to try and hook into a bit of a cold front. Now, I think maybe in the days of old, with boats, although all built within the same rule, they all had slightly different strengths and weaknesses, different sail inventories. Everybody motored their boats for slightly different conditions. You would probably have had a bigger chance of a split in the fleet where someone would take the northerly option. Now, looking at the weather routing options, the difference in the two routes is only 3 hours. But someone might have the belief that they can sail 10% faster than everybody else if they take off and get into their own conditions. I think it's a function of as Sidney said, the one design element, the AIS, and it's a strategy strategy is coming into play. Dongfeng, they would be all of those boats. They've all got the same systems. They would have all seen the northerly option, but Dongfeng, for example, would be sitting there, and if they saw Mapfre peel off to the northerly option, they'd probably let them go. Whereas if they saw Abu Dhabi, who's a lot more important to them on points, go to the north, they might very seriously consider going with them or covering them. So
Sidney?
That's where strategy is playing a much more important role, I think, than just sort of pure navigation in this race now with the one design element.
Also, I'm not a navigator, but I spent a few days with Jean-Yves Bernot, the French navigator, and since then I'm trying to stay too stupid in my little office. So I try to follow and do some routing with the fleet. And what I see is that down there the weather is changing very quick, and taking the option of a long route is quite dangerous because you've got the data telling you that there is an option going the long way that could be quick, but maybe 12 hours later this option is gone. So splitting from the fleet to go for a long route option is I think pretty delicate in this area.
Definitely, and it's not as apparent as for example the early part of Leg 4 with the SCA and Brunel splitting. There's not that kind of advantage available to them. So, and I guess it's slightly conservative, but it's a strategy as well. Let's stick with the fleet, and they might be a mile apart, but I guess the stress levels might be high and the intensity level is extremely high sitting within a mile of 3 or 4 other boats, but probably not as stressful as sitting out by yourself, with 300 miles of leverage over the rest of the fleet. So,
fair enough.
Yeah, I think that they could be as well, at that stage of the race, the boats start to know a bit each other, and people start to influence others as well. Some teams start showing some confidence, some other not yet. And for sure, as you say, Campbell, before, depending who's taking an option, the other boat will react differently. From my seat, I'm pretty impressed by Dongfeng. They were at the back, and now they are in the lead. Again, it's not the first time, and I'm pretty sure that it's like on a football field, on a rugby field. Some people are showing confidence, and it's the other people around can feel it as well. I think at that stage of the race, he start to enter in the game.
Yeah, I have to say as well. I mean, I've been seriously impressed by Dongfeng's performance. I think it's potentially a function, and I'm sitting here in the seat as looking at it from a navigator's perspective. I'll spend 1 hour a day looking at one weather report on one weather model, and those guys have got multiple models and multiple position reports coming in. So the level of intensity for the navigator is huge. But from what I understand with Dongfeng, and with the French element, they've got a seriously diversely skilled group of guys on board who can all sort of input into. They can all drive and trim, and they've also got a very good handle on navigation and strategy. So they're potentially in this effectively quite short-handed fleet. That's where their strength lies, with having diverse skills on board, rather than maybe some of the other teams have got more specific skills. They've got a dedicated navigator and a dedicated helmsman and a dedicated trimmer. Dongfeng have got more of a spread of skills across their crew. That not sure where I'm running with this conversation, but
well, I'll pick it up for you. I mean, they also still have a bit of lack of experience in the Southern Ocean, and we are about to see Southern Ocean conditions again coming up as they head towards Cape Horn. But they all had kind of a scary night the other night with the Chinese jibes. Charles said it was the first time that's ever happened to him, and he looks a little bit in the video. To be honest, he looks a little like deer in the headlights when they are on their side, and you see his eyes actually look right into the stern cam. He's just trying to figure out what to do, and I think it's Stromberg, who's driving at the time, starts yelling about pulling on the runners, and it's just sort of the guy who's driving is instantly aware of what's happening next. But Sidney, what do you think as a leader, especially in that situation, and about Chinese jibes in general? He said it never happened before, but how common are they? How dangerous are they? I mean, for us, all the teams were affected differently by it. It was quite an intense night, and yet they've all come out fine.
If I understood well, 4 boats Chinese jibed, which is quite a surprise, because with a boat with 2 rudders, you have plenty of control. So it's also showing that the fleet overall doesn't have such a big experience of the boat. I mean, they've done miles on this race already, but it seems that it was the first time in the history of those boats that they were all meeting this kind of conditions. So it's quite rare to Chinese jibe. In the meantime, it does happen to every sailor. I've done once. I was on Assa Abloy. I was lucky because it was with no speed. It was after a broach. But you have to go through it to avoid the mistake. I think from my seat again, I think the solution would be to have a little less skill. In fact, to accept in tough conditions like this, to accept to lose power, but you have plenty of power. So it's hard when you're on a racing mode. You're always looking for more speed, more power, more speed, more power. That's in your brain non-stop. And at some stage, it's the opposite. You have to decide, okay, how to get rid of power. And it wasn't so hard at that time. But then the wind came up to 30 or between 30 and 40, and they were still into this racing mode. And I think before you switch, it takes just a little too long, and until you broach, and that's too late. And then for sure, when it happens, it doesn't happen so often. So to find the right solution is an issue. Where to start? You've got the stack underwater. You have to make sure that you have everyone on board and so on. But it's an unusual situation that every sailor will meet or has faced once at least. And I'm just surprised that so many boats on the fleet did. So that's why I'm thinking that the knowledge of those boats is still there's still a learning curve, still a general learning curve in the fleet.
Yeah.
They still need to. I think they're probably, as you said, you're quite right. This is probably the first sort of big Southern Ocean blow that they've had, and they're finding the limits. And it's also a little bit harder with the mindset with the fleet so close together to detune a little bit in the interests of security. Until they start seeing boats around them doing this, then someone will always be wanting to push for that extra 10%. The video yesterday, again from Ian Walker, who's been through that part of the world many times, and I guess every time these guys go down there, it's still it's extremely cold, it's extremely fatiguing, and you're as far as you could possibly be from anywhere from any land, and I don't think anything can really prepare you to be acting normally in that part of the world. Sydney probably have a better view on that, but every time you get into the Southern Ocean, it's testing. It never gets any easier.
Yeah, go ahead, Sidney.
I think on this leg it was a bit special because you could read. I think Dongfeng has a pretty open communication. Charles is not hiding his feelings, like going with new guys and so on, his responsibility. I don't know if the other boats are so open in their communication, but I think it's a bit special because when you leave Auckland, especially when you're following a hurricane, so big. Of course, everybody is very is kind of under stress. And for people who never been in the big south or the Southern Ocean, I remember myself the first time I was thinking, where am I going? You know, so we've got lots of stress. Then you go. Finally, they start the leg with not much wind. You know, the first few days were not that strong. So then when you're ready for the battle, in fact, it's not a battle. And when you just calm down, then you got hit by the strong wind. And so that's why I think in their mode it was not so easy. One thing I noticed as well is between two boats, one boat with 30 knots and one boat with 40 knots. At one stage it was like this. The boat speed was the same. So you know when you're racing the boat, it's for sure at some stage there's if you look at the polars, and the polars are very often wrong in very strong wind because we think the boat speed keeps accelerating, but no. When you reach 30 knots of wind and big waves, you can't go much faster than the waves themselves. So you know it's quickly time to reduce boat speed and power because you can't go quicker anyway. So but that's it takes time to tune your brain for that.
You just mentioned that you remember the first time you go down there. We got a great blog in actually from Charlie Enright, skipper of LV Medica, whose first time it is right now in the Southern Ocean. He said, and I'll just quote him here, you guys, "In less than a day's time, we expect to return to Southern Ocean normalcy, and that's what will carry us down to the Horn. The order in which we round Sailing's Everest will not be determined by who had a better 13-knot jibe rounding the ice limit. It will be determined by who is able to shred the hardest over the course of the coming days, and we mustn't lose sight of that." And it's interesting that they're a team that hasn't actually Chinese jibed, so maybe a bit with Will's experience, they have been able to throttle back a little bit in the gnarly stuff. But Campbell, can you talk to us about what we are expecting coming up towards the Horn, what we should see, and then maybe as we get around?
It's 3 days out, sort of 3 to 4 days before the boats get to the Horn. In the weather I've been looking at, it's probably 12 hours old now, the weather I had a look at, but with the southerly option, the guys are really going to just start getting led down, sailing down the leading edge of what appeared to be a relatively mild cold front. So they're going to end up, and it's from quite a very a very southerly low pressure system. So they're going to end up sort of running and potentially again up to sort of 30 to 40 knots of wind and probably quite an established sea state. So the sea state could build but be large ocean swells rather than too much of a confused sea. And some of the suggestions were that they're going to spend many hours at the 140 to 150 Truman angle range in sort of 25 to 35 knots. So not necessarily VMG running, which, I mean, if everything pans out and the sea state lines up, we could see some record runs being made. Hopefully we do, because it might be the last opportunity for these boats in this race to really stretch their legs. And approaching Cape Horn, it's looking, again, it's a long way out, but it is looking like a sort of a traditional, quite a strong westerly heading around that part of the world, and it could, the system which is bringing them into the Horn could really compress around that part of the world. It's infamous for the building sea state and the accelerated winds around that part of the world. So they could be in for a gnarly sort of traditional Cape Horn rounding.
Okay, final question to you, Sidney, because we actually have a live X coming up here. Going forward in this race, we're thinking it could be to the finish in Gothenburg before we really know who is going to win. I mean, it has been such tight racing, especially at the top. What do you expect over the coming legs, and how do you take that on as a sailor when we still have so many legs to go that it could just be a run all the way through?
Well, just for this leg already, I think the position at Cape Horn will be far from the position in Itajaí. I think what's important is to stay with the pack until Cape Horn, and then it's a new race again, and it's very important for the teams to don't break the pace on board, because when you went through the Southern Ocean, it's very common to relax, take like 12 or almost 20 hours to relax before you race again. And that's pretty bad with such a tight fleet. I think it will be important for the guys and the skippers on board to keep the momentum on board and keep racing without taking time to switch to Southern Ocean to another mode. But the race is very long, as we said at the beginning, and I think rotation is crucial. In the past, rotating crew was a sign of something going wrong on board. I think it's totally different now. I think it's very, very heavy on everyone. So rotation is important. It's hard to rotate a skipper, and I don't think it's good. But I think there's a lot of load on the skippers to keep the pace and keep the pressure all the way to the finish. And I like people who start rotating, who's already started rotating. I think it's a good plan because people can't, you can be the best person, but it's hard to. You spend too long together. You're too tired. You see each other too much. You need to breathe a bit. And I think it's a big load on the skippers themselves because they have to be on board all the time, and it will be a big achievement to get to the finishing line and succeed in maintaining the level as high and even higher if it's possible.
Well, thank you both so much. This was really excellent analysis. Campbell said thank you for joining us and hope the sailors get a bit more rest as they head out into the gnarlier conditions towards Cape Horn. Wishing them safe passage and see you guys Monday on the next Inside Track.